Hey guys, welcome to this review of not the next shift in chapter to Metamorphosed to Malleability, but to the overview, if you will, of part one. That's right, part one of Metamorphosed to Malleability's 2022 Christmas special. That's right. Desi Arts, that's DEZZIE Arts, aka Michelle. Her real name is Michelle. Former DA name was Jacqueline. Basically decided this year to do a Christmas special. Now, she had done this before since she began the series. The first time was when she had Briella, right after she started to really kind of get more control of her powers, if you will. Not totally, but, I think around the midpoint. I think this was around maybe right before she did the whole Maggie thing, maybe afterwards, I can't really recall. Where she turned into Maggie the dog for the first time and nearly lost herself to Maggie. Basically identifiable wise. Anyway, to get to the point, she had done this before where Briella used her powers to turn into a reindeer, kind of a Rudolph-like reindeer from what I'm understanding by the description of the story. And her best friend Elanie, or Elanie, if you will, I never could pronounce that name, was kind of like an elf or Santa Claus. So it's not the first time she's done it, nor is it the first time she's done it in two parts, because like I said, that first one she did kind of exactly that. Here, it's the first time as far as I know, or the second time as far as I know, where she's doing a Christmas special, of the series, featuring Briella and Crystal. Now, what's interesting about this is the way it begins, because obviously it's described that Briella and Crystal are laying in bed after a bit of intimacy, if you will, and Briella has completely covered her fiancé from head to toe in her mandible body, her very mandible elastic body. And basically the way her covering of a fiancé is described is not only is she covering her like a bodysuit, a latex bodysuit, but it's a faceless latex bodysuit. Yeah, a faceless latex bodysuit. Kind of similar from description, like what Jovan 16, that's Jovian 16, did recently in the final chapters, or the final parts, I should say, of chapter 11 of the Amanda and Nicole series, where he had both characters do something similar, and of course that culminated in basically a fusion at the end. Now, I'm not saying that's what we're going to get here when the story is done, but there's something that Briella does have in store, does have in mind. I'll get into that in a moment. But anyway, long story short, she has Crystal, Briella that is, covered from head to toe in her essence. Head to toe in her essence. Which is, not the first time, nor will it be the last. But, the way it's described is she doesn't, have her, like, completely covered to where she can't see where she's going. She can still, basically see, but by somewhat shadowy, translucent perception. Like, all she has to do is, like, like, if she's walking around, all she has to do is, like, get an idea of where she's at. Like, just barely see something, and then she'll know, okay, I know I'm out in the house. And like I said, obviously this was done because they had some intimacy earlier on in the day. And this is supposed to take place on Christmas Eve. It takes place on Christmas Eve, by the way. And they obviously, like I said, had some mid to late afternoon, early to mid evening, or early to late evening moment together, the intimacy together, if you will. And I just saw a cat walk across our house here. But anyway, they basically, it's described that they just had some intimacy throughout, I'm assuming, either the late afternoon to mid-evening or early to late evening of Christmas Eve. That's basically how it's described. That's basically how it's described. And the way it's described this way is Briella materializes, or as Michelle describes it, materializes, if you will. Let me get some coffee here. But like I said, Michelle describes it, it's, materializes. In other words, her description of when Briella materializes her mouth or her face or something like that, on the surface of something that she's become, it's described as materializes, because she could just, if she wants to, after materializing like a part of herself, she could just ooze down a little bit onto the floor if she wanted to and reform back to normal or something. But basically, yeah, Briella materializes her face, well, I wouldn't say her face, but her mouth across a certain section of the bodysuit that she decides to have a little fun with, because I think she tells Crystal that, hey, you're the one that asked me to do this, or something like that. I think that's what she asked her. Or something like that. Yeah, she said that basically she was the one that was too excited to sleep. And the way it's described is the appendage, the tongue, corkscrewed, thickening itself as it looped over itself to go spelunking in a soaked cavern outlined by Briella's luscious lips. In other words, a certain area, if you know what I mean. And she does that for a bit and everything. And it's wearing Crystal out, I should say. And the reason Crystal was too excited to sleep is because Briella has a special gift she wants to give her. She has a special gift she wants to give her, but she hasn't said what it is. So after kind of teasing her a little bit more, kind of going spelunking, if you know what I mean, she extends her lips, through a long tendril or tentacle away from the cavern area, if you will, of crystals. She extends the lips up, forms a head on the tendril, if you will. She forms her head, on the tendril, to accompany the lips. And she basically sees that, Crystal is just completely worn out. She is just done, if you will. And she gives her a little bit of a kiss on the lips, or basically where she kind of has an idea where the lips are, because like I said, she has her girlfriend completely covered in basically a faceless latex bodysuit, if you know what I mean. So anyway, long story short, she decides to, rest her head next to Crystal's before Crystal decides to finally doze off. And then what she does is she slowly retracts herself off of Crystal, basically still in the form of the bodysuit that covered Crystal. She retracts herself, tucks Crystal in, and then goes out out of the room very quietly. She turns off the lights and everything, and leaves the room and shuts the door very quietly as not to wake Crystal. And reminder, she's still in the form of the bodysuit, the faceless bodysuit that she had created of herself to cover Crystal. Anyway, she looks herself over, kind of extends her neck a little bit, and looks herself over, and gets a chuckle out of the way she looks. And what she decides to do is have a little fun. So what she does is she reforms a faceless head on top of the bodysuit. She reforms a faceless head on top of the bodysuit because when she retracts herself from Crystal, the only thing that's missing is the head, right? So when she walks out and everything and notices, that she's still in the form of a bodysuit, sans, a head, the exception being a head, she kind of gets a chuckle out of the way she looks, where her mouth and face are with the, tendril attached to them, and then gets a little bit of a silly idea, something that she's kind of thought about doing, but never really considered, since her and Crystal are lesbian lovers, if you will, engaged to be married. And what she decides to do is retract the tendril back into the body, into the cavern area of the suit, if you know what I mean. But then start to kind of change a little bit. Her mouth goes sideways, her eyes close and then her eyes close and then vanish and all that. And she starts to take a very, very phallic-like shape. That's right. She starts to take a very phallic-like shape. And once she does, of course, not only does she reform, like I said, a faceless head on top and everything, so that she could kind of look down a little bit, or at least extend the head on top to go look down at her new addition and check herself out. But she starts to have a little fun with this little new phallic addition, if you will, that she's added to herself. She starts having a little fun with it, swinging it around. And then, of course, she can't resist the urge. She can't resist the urge to do a very traditional trope that we've seen in a lot of stories or webcomics where a female basically, when they get this appendage, decides to kind of explore. That's right. She decides to start pleasuring herself. She starts to decide to pleasure herself to no degree, if you know what I mean. She decides to start pleasuring herself to no degree, to the point that when she finally, I guess you could say, has her moment, her climactic moment, not only does she have it over and over again, but she notices, but she notices that the more she's having this moment, the more she's extending it, the less of her body-wise there is. But she doesn't really care because, hey, she could just basically pull herself back together, when need be. And it gets to a point that when she's continuing this, all that's left of her is the phallic shape, with two round orbs, if you know what I mean, at the bottom of the phallic shape. And even that doesn't last long. Doesn't last long. After one last moment, in that shape, she gives off what is described as a gurgling moan, and just becomes basically, I think, a puddled blob on the ground. And the way Desi artist Michelle describes it, she had basically shot off so much of herself, during this process, that parts of her on the floor, on the walls, some of it gone even into the main room, and that the way she's able to reconstitute herself is having all of them kind of reconvene to where she is like little worms, like heading towards the home or something like that. Little worms going, stuff like that, if you will. Then she decides, after she's gathered herself back all together, to kind of not only be like a little bit of a shapeless blob, but then reform the blob into basically Santa, an elf, and his 8 reindeer. And the way Michelle has fun with this is that after she has to recreate, basically what looks like to be, or what is described to be like maybe one of those decorations you would see in a shopping center or a shop or a mini shop or whatever, or even at a house that people can, people can get any of those and even find a place to put them. She describes it as, again, Michelle has fun here by basically describing what Briella has come as Santa. She doesn't even say, oh, she's Santa Briella or whatever. She just says Santa and all that. And she has Briella basically take off into the air like Santa would with the actual reindeer. What I'm saying is she has Briella take off like the actual Santa would with the reindeer. But instead she decides to have Briella, shoot a part of herself onto the ceiling so that she could just twirl around, like I said, being like one of those decorations that goes past the Christmas tree, past the chimney and stuff. Just have a little bit of fun, if you will. Test their abilities. And apparently doing this change, this miniature change, is enough to kind of push her to her limits. And afterwards, after Briella lands in front of the fireplace, if you will, after she lands in front of the fireplace, she melts down, but then extends up to basically the mantle area where the fireplace, and changes herself into I think 1 or 2 stockings. She changes herself into stockings and goes steel. In other words, she becomes the stocking for at least a couple of hours. Now, what's interesting is what's described afterwards. Because what's described afterwards is the fact that, excuse me while I get more coffee here. Got to get myself ready in about 24 minutes to, get in the shower and everything and go to work. But anyway, getting back to the review here and the review and everything, Briella decides afterwards, after having her fun as Santa, to land in front of the fireplace, melt down back into a blob, and then reshape herself into a stocking, which, she hangs herself onto the mantle of the chimney. And as we have described and found out, previously, in recent chapters, I should say, Briella decides to basically, kind of, how do I put it? Kind of, start to live out what that doppelganger accused her of not doing, and that's basically live out being the object you are, even for a couple of hours. So Briella basically turns herself into the stocking and goes steel. Now, what I was trying to say there before I got some coffee to drink and mentioned I have to get myself ready in a little bit, Briella is described after she's turned into a stocking and hung onto the chimney's mantle for the night, at least until her fiance wakes up, looks over towards the table in the kitchen and notices the wrapped gift that she made for her fiance. Now, it's evident that a part of her is in the present, but we don't know what part of her is. We don't know, what her plan is or anything like that. We don't. All we know is Briella basically was tempted to also be the present box because, she could do that. She could be the box and the present contained within, but she decided that, instead she'd rather just be what the present is inside and have her fiance open an actual box to see what's in there. Now, what she has in mind, what the present is that Briella has in mind for Crystal, one can only guess. One could only guess. I mean, for all we know, it could be maybe, an extension of herself. It could be an extension of Briella. We don't know. We don't really know. We do. I'll say this. I will say this. Obviously, this takes place within the context of the current continuity. It's not a one shot. If it's a one shot, I can understand maybe, what direction she could Michelle's going to go in with the story. I can understand that. But if it takes place, like I said, within the context of the story, then obviously it's got to be something that is going to be utilized, every now and then as we, get towards certain parts of the story. Now, we do know that obviously they're building to a fur convention story arc. A furry convention story arc. But, whether or not this has anything to do with that, we don't know. We don't know if this has anything to do with it. Now, if I was to speculate, as to what it could be, I would say more than anything, if I was to speculate what it could potentially be, more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, is, like I said, Briella's been developing her powers even more so than they've ever been. She's been trying to experiment of how much she could push her powers to certain limits, if not unlimited. And I would not be surprised if maybe part of the present to Crystal from Briella, again, I don't know what Michelle has in mind. Be honest with you, I don't. But if part of the present that Briella has in mind for Crystal is basically giving her, what she just had the previous night, and that's a latex bodysuit that she could change into anyone she wants, or even kind of give her the limited mobility to change into what she wants, something maybe not human or even fantasy-wise, maybe something inanimate, we don't know, is giving her that ability to where, hey, you wear this, and you'll have sort of an idea of or you'll sort of be granted, a similar, ability like me. Like maybe, she gives her, like I say, a bodysuit that allows her to make it an extension of herself. Like when when she wants to have fun and Briella's not around, she can just put on the bodysuit and it's an extension of not just Briella, but now it becomes an extension of Crystal, for all we know. And all Crystal has to do is maybe concentrate and it works, or make a command and it works. We don't know. We don't know if that might be. I mean, that would be an interesting direction to go in, to where it would, to where Crystal would be granted abilities like this, but be very limited. Like, hey, the most you could do is change your appearance into whoever you want. Basically, real life or fantasy or whatever. And that if you want to go inanimate, that probably the best options to go inanimate is something that could be lamp shape or plant shape and all that, stuff like that. Again, we don't know. We don't know what, Briella has in mind. Really. We don't. We don't know what she has in mind. Now, there is the possibility that Briella could say, hey, this part of me, I want you to insert it into a certain area, if you know what I mean, a certain bottom area. And by doing so, what you'll allow me to do is extend parts of myself into you and you'll kind of basically get the same abilities I have, but not, not to the full extent. Like over time they'll come, but you'll have a taste of what I can do. In other words, basically give her very limited malleability like powers. Again, this is just mere speculation. Mere speculation. But again, it could be anything. It could be anything. But again, it's mere speculation. However, overall, the first part of this Christmas special I thought was good. I do know that, by doing this, she is going to extend, the regular continuity by a few more weeks. So 244 will probably be the first Thursday of the new year, should be. Which means basically the first Thursday of the new year, which the second is Monday, the third is Wednesday. The second is Monday, the third is Tuesday, the fourth is Wednesday, the fifth. So basically the fifth will be the 244th chapter, the 12th will be 245, the 19th will be 246, the 26th will be 247, and then the first Thursday in February, because again, the 26th is going to be a Thursday, 27th will be a Friday, 28th a Saturday, 29th, a Sunday, 30th a Monday, 31st a Tuesday. So the 2nd of February will be okay, let me go back. Okay, so the 5th would be 44, the 9th, the 5th, I should say, would be 44, the 12th would be 45, the 19th would be 46, and the 26th would be 47. So the 2nd of February would be 48. The 9th would be, the February 9th would be 49. And then the 16th, 2 days after Valentine's, would be 250, unless she interrupts again for Valentine's. So we don't know. But anyway, though, this, like I said, has been a great story. Cannot deny any of that. However you want to look at it. This was a great story so far. Great little special. Great little diversion from the norm. And again, we'll have to see next week what she has in mind. We really will. Because again, this is just one of those stories where you just have to picture in your mind, imagine in your mind, what Briella has in store for Crystal. You have to really imagine it, because again, it could be anything. It could be anything that she has in mind for her. It could be something simple, we don't know. But it could be anything, But we'll have to see. We will have to see. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are. I will provide a link again to the Metamorphosed to Malleability series and the Christmas special, part 1. Give me your thoughts. Give Desi Art feedback on, as well. Again, guys, you have to really check these stories out along with the one-shot specials or two-part one-shot specials. They're worth reading. And again, just picturing in your mind what the characters are doing is, within the story is worth it as well. And as a matter of fact, she even has, as you probably noticed, artwork of these characters as well, so you can kind of see what they look like. But overall, it's actually pretty good. Next week will be part 2, if not sooner, because of course next week is the Thursday before Christmas. You got to have something out before then. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna really say on it, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Like the video, comment down below. Like I said, comment down below. Live chat during the premiere. check me out at my BW Roses Discussions podcast, which is now over 500 podcasts, guys. 500 podcast episodes. Check that out at all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also, support me at Vimeo. Follow me on Vimeo at BW Roses for content you can't get here on YouTube, as well as at deviantart.com/BVW1979. Also, support me at Venmo at Brian-Romer-2 and at Cash App at BW Roses 98. Also, ladies and gentlemen, support me over at patreon.com/BW Roses with a $1 or $3 tier. And check out the Teespring store at the end of this video. It will be in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Click on that to go and see and find merchandise you can't get anywhere else, just in time for the holidays. Hopefully you can get it before Christmas. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are overall on the story. Love to hear from each and every one of you on this. And until next time, I am out.